Have you ever wondered why a paradise of sun and sea struggles with poverty despite being so close to America's wealth? Let's dive into the real reason America keeps Puerto Rico poor. Puerto Rico is a small tropical island located roughly 1,000 miles off the coast of Florida and surrounded by Caribbean neighbors such as the Dominican Republic and Jamaica. In many ways, Puerto Rico shares similarities with these nations, yet its relationship with the United States has defined its modern history in a very different and much harsher way. Since the late 1800s, Puerto Rico has been an unincorporated territory of the U.S., a status that means it is neither a full-fledged state with equal rights nor an independent nation with complete autonomy. This unique position has allowed America to impose policies that have long hindered Puerto Rico's economic growth. Under U.S. control, Puerto Rico was systematically stripped of its ability to make independent decisions. While its residents are U.S. citizens, they do not enjoy the full spectrum of rights or representation. They are subject to federal laws and even eligible for the military draft, yet they lack the political power to influence the laws that govern their daily lives. This has meant that federal policies have often been designed to benefit the mainland at the expense of the island's own development. Despite being tied to one of the wealthiest nations in the world, Puerto Rico's economy has languished. Treated as an economy on its own, it ranks as the second largest in the Caribbean, with a per capita income of about $41,000, a figure that, on paper, seems healthy compared to many developed European nations. However, in reality, many Puerto Ricans live in conditions that fall far below what one would expect from such a high average. The island struggles with economic depression, a shrinking population, overwhelming debt, frequent natural disasters, and mismanagement by local government. For instance, while even some of America's poorest states like Mississippi are significantly richer, Puerto Ricans earn less than half of what their mainland counterparts do. One striking example is the disparity in federal funding. Although Puerto Rico has a similar population size to states like Mississippi, it receives dramatically less federal assistance. Medicaid funding, for example, is about 10 times lower for Puerto Rico, even though nearly half of its population lives in poverty. This deliberate withholding of funds has had severe consequences for public services, leaving many Puerto Ricans without adequate health care, transportation, or electricity infrastructure. The shortage of funds, combined with the island's economic mismanagement, has created a vicious cycle of poverty and dependency. Historically, Puerto Rico's challenges did not start with modern mismanagement alone. Before American control, the island was under Spanish rule for nearly 400 years. The Spanish recognized Puerto Rico's natural advantages. Its excellent harbor in San Juan led them to call it Puerto Rico, or Rich Port. Under Spanish rule, Puerto Rico's economy was built on agriculture, notably sugarcane, tobacco, and coffee, produced through the forced labor of indigenous peoples and African slaves. When slavery was abolished in the late 1800s, the island's economy was already primed for exploitation by new powers. The United States saw strategic value in Puerto Rico. Its location made it a key asset for protecting shipping lanes and a buffer near Cuba. After a short but brutal conflict with Spain, the U.S. gained control of Puerto Rico along with other territories like Guam and the Philippines. However, unlike the Philippines, Puerto Rico was never granted independence. It was absorbed into America's colonial empire. With American control, a new phase of economic exploitation began. The U.S. quickly set up a government and imposed federal laws that significantly curtailed Puerto Rico's autonomy. Trade and tax policies were designed to benefit American interests rather than the island's own economic growth. Recognizing Puerto Rico's natural suitability for sugar production, U.S. companies moved in to exploit this resource. The island's vast sugar plantations were transformed into monocultural economies that served the needs of the mainland rather than the local population. Large American corporations displaced local landowners, turning Puerto Rico into a production line where the profits rarely stayed on the island. In the early 20th century, laws like the Jones Act of 1917 further deepened Puerto Rico's economic woes. While this act granted U.S. citizenship to Puerto Ricans and established a local Senate, it also mandated that all cargo traveling between U.S. ports be transported on U.S.-built, U.S.-owned, and U.S.-crewed ships. This requirement dramatically increased shipping costs, making goods more expensive for Puerto Ricans who already earned very low wages. After World War II, the U.S. government launched Operation Bootstrap, a series of policies aimed at transforming Puerto Rico's economy from agricultural to industrial. At first glance, this industrialization appeared to lift the island out of poverty. From 1950 to 1980, Puerto Rico's per capita gross national product grew nearly tenfold, and disposable incomes and educational levels increased. However, the benefits of this economic boom were unevenly distributed. The policies primarily favored American companies and wealthy business owners, while the majority of Puerto Ricans saw little improvement in their living standards. One of the most controversial measures was Section 936 of the U.S. Tax Code, which allowed American companies to operate subsidiaries in Puerto Rico without paying federal income taxes, as long as they sent out their profits as dividends. This policy turned Puerto Rico into a tax haven for U.S. corporations. For example, a pharmaceutical giant could transfer a key asset to its Puerto Rican branch, produce products at a much lower cost, and then sell them back on the mainland at high prices while enjoying tax-free profits. In 1987, pharmaceutical companies received benefits totaling $1.3 billion, a staggering figure that represented about 5% of Puerto Rico's entire economy at the time. Although this brought in investments, the wealth generated rarely translated into broad-based economic benefits for local residents. Over time, Puerto Rico's overdependence on U.S. policies created a fragile economic structure. When the federal government began to phase out Section 936 in the 1990s, companies started to leave the island. This exodus, coupled with the bursting of a real estate bubble just a few years later, plunged Puerto Rico into an economic collapse. The island had become so reliant on protective policies and U.S. subsidies that, when those supports vanished, its industries could not compete on their own. As companies pulled out, Puerto Rico experienced massive job losses, which in turn sparked a brain drain. Its most skilled and educated young people began leaving in search of better opportunities on the mainland. Puerto Rico now faces a crippling debt crisis, with government debt at levels far exceeding those of any U.S. state. Lacking the ability to declare bankruptcy or secure international aid, as it is neither a state nor an independent country, the island has been forced to implement severe austerity measures. These cuts have further reduced public services and quality of life, deepening the cycle of poverty and dependency. As you reflect on this history, consider the human cost behind the numbers and policies. Puerto Rico's story is one of untapped potential, a tale of an island whose resources and people have been sacrificed for the financial gain of others. The issues here aren't just economic. They are deeply political and social, affecting millions of lives every day. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into Puerto Rico's history and current struggles insightful, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more content on important issues.